Hello and welcome to episode 2 of the Vintage series, a video series focused on the vintage format of Magic the Gathering. As always, I would like to thank you for watching, and if you'd like to support my content, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, as well as potentially pledging to my Patreon. Our episode this time is going to be focused on the variant of Dredge, known as Pitch Dredge. What is Pitch Dredge? Pitch Dredge is a variant of the deck Dredge, which utilizes the namesake mechanic from Ravnica, City of Guilds. Dredge operates on a different axis, as it allows you to replace any instance of drawing a card with the act of placing a set number of cards from your library into your graveyard, before placing the card with Dredge back into your hand from the graveyard. This deck functions solely on the back of Bazaar of Baghdad, making use of the mechanic to deploy free creatures and spells that act from the graveyard. The name Pitch specifically refers to the variant of this deck that uses counter magic such as Force of Will and Mental Misstep, but also uses free spells like Mindbreak Trap and Unmask. Playing Dredge does take some getting used to, because you are not playing Magic in a traditional sense. Part of the skill of playing this deck is getting used to the triggered abilities and how they function. Some of the pros of playing this deck is that Dredge is quite frankly one of the best Game 1 decks in the entire format. As many players don't have the space to play Graveyard Hate main deck, Dredge is able to scrape free wins in Game 1 simply because its opponent is unable to interact with the deck. In addition, Pitch Dredge playing counter magic and cards like Mindbreak Trap allow it to interact with its opponent to delay their game plan, giving you the necessary time to win the game, but it doesn't always need to. In fact, this is one of the few decks in the format that can win a game without casting a single spell. Some of the cons, however, are that variants can often lead to poor dredges and sometimes bad variants in mulliganing. This deck absolutely relies on keeping a hand with Bazaar of Baghdad, and should you not mulligan to one, the results can be catastrophic. As well, due to Dredge's presence as one of the boogeymen of the format, every deck is well prepared for it post-board, sometimes devoting up to 7 to 8 slots alone for graveyard interaction, whether it be cards like Leyline of the Void, Grafdigger's Cage, or Tormod's Crypt. Here we have the core cards of the deck, the first of which being the deck's draw engine, Bazaar of Baghdad. This land is very powerful and the major reason to play a deck like Dredge in the first place, since it is difficult to interact with. In post-board situations, this card can also be used to attempt to find interaction. Because of how necessary Bazaar is to the deck, the card's Serum Powder is used to give the deck further ways to find an opening hand that contains a Bazaar. One thing you might notice about this particular version of the deck is that the only lands in the main deck are for Bazaar of Baghdad. The other large core part of this deck is the cards Bridge from Below and Cabal Therapy. These cards interact very well together, allowing you to sacrifice creatures to discard cards, as well as to trigger Bridge to get zombie tokens. In addition, the card Dread Return acts as a token generator for Bridge from Below, while also being able to bring back a Silver Bullet from the graveyard. The creatures this deck mostly contains either have the word Dredge on them, or are potentially free in some way. Narcomoeba is one of the most important of these, entering play if it is placed into the graveyard from the library. Halloween has also come into its own in this deck, providing the deck with a creature that can be cast for free off of a single Bazaar activation, making turn 1 Bazaar activations potentially scary for an unprepared opponent. And finally, Prized Amalgam is proven to be a powerful threat in this deck as well. I won't spend too much time on the various Dredge creatures here, but I will note that in post-board games, sometimes casting these creatures can help provide leverage, such as using Golgari Thug's Death Trigger to rebuy a Narcomoeba, or using Stinkweed Ape's Combat Damage Trigger to kill a particularly nasty creature. Even in some cases, reanimating a Golgari Grave Troll could spell lethal for an opponent. The final free creature and one of the best cards in the deck is the card Icarid. This creature is a recurring beatstick, providing not just 3 damage, but the possibility of generating multiple zombies either through its sacrifice trigger at end step, or by being used to full of Cabal Therapy or Dread Return. And also, because this is Pitch Dredge, this deck plays 3 main deck pieces of interaction and counter magic in the form of Mindbreak Trap, Force of Will, and Mental Misstep. In addition, it plays main deck Leyline of the Void as a hedge against the Mirror Match, Oath of Druids, and generally anything that wants to resolve Yawgmoth's Will. It is also a powerful interaction with Bridge from Below, due to the fact that creature cards do not go to the graveyard and do not exile your bridges. However, it is worth noting that while Leyline is very powerful, the downside of the card is that decks that play Young Pyromancer or Monastery Mentor can sacrifice their tokens in combat or with removal, since Leyline only cares about cards entering the graveyard. This is important because it means tokens will trigger the second part of Bridge from Below, exiling any bridges in your graveyard. And finally, the 2 silver bullets that this deck plays are Elish Norn, Grand Cenobite, and Flamekin Zealot. These can both win games on their own by just getting them into play off of Dread Return. Sideboard-wise, this deck contains mostly cards to proactively deal with graveyard hate, in addition to reactive spells to hate. Unmask can help discard hate or game plans, while Nature's Claim and Chain of Vapor help deal with the hate cards themselves. In lieu of this, the deck runs rainbow lands in the sideboard such as Mana Confluence and City of Brass to be able to help cast these cards when they need to be brought in. This is a sample hand that is a classic example of a snap keep in the Dredge world. As you can see, this hand has a Bazaar of Baghdad in it, which is the important piece that we want to see. In addition, it has also the upside of being able to cast Hollow One on turn 1, as well as the best treasure in Golgari Grave Troll. It also has a Cabal Therapy and Elish Norn in it, which is also very, very good. This sample hand is an example of a hand that we would actually look at using the card Serum Powder with. Serum Powder allows you at any time during the mulligan process to exile your current hand from the game and then draw however many cards you exiled. More often than not, Serum Powder is effective at finding you a Bazaar of Baghdad, so don't be afraid to activate it if you find yourself with a hand that doesn't have a Bazaar. It is actually much better than choosing to mulligan, as in this case hand, you will be drawing 7 fresh cards off the top of your deck. Now we're going to be looking at some gameplay to help illustrate the power of this deck. Our first match to talk about is versus the deck Oath of Druids, in which we are able to win 2-0. Alright, this hand is essentially a snap keep. The opening hand contains 2 Bazaar of Baghdad, which is the card that we want to mulligan for if it is not in our opening hand. Bazaar of Baghdad is tap, draw 2, discard 3 cards. This is a very powerful effect for this deck. Having 2 of these means that we are a little bit insulated against effects like Wasteland and Strip Mine if they are playing those kinds of effects. We also have an opening hand pre-game Leyline of the Void, which can be very, very helpful in these kind of matchups. We're going to go ahead and play the Bazaar, and we're going to pass turn to our opponent, in the off chance that they do possibly have some sort of effect like that. And hopefully they don't. Our opponent is going to play Polluted Delta and Black Lotus. It's very interesting. I wonder what they're going to cast with Polluted Delta and Black Lotus. Possibly could be Grixis Thieves. Possibly could be casting a card like Notion Thief when we go to try to Bazaar. That's very powerful. They're cracking the Lotus for triple green, however, and casting Oath of Druids. Turn 1 Oath of Druids. So we could potentially run into a situation where we can just lose the game if they ran into anything pretty offensive, like possibly Gristlebrand, and we don't have a way to just kill them. Maybe we waited till their end step, activate this Bazaar, discard some cards. This Icarid, Golgari Thug, and this Golgari Grave Troll. And in response to the Icarid trigger, we're going to go ahead and activate Bazaar Baghdad. This is kind of a normal thing you'll see. Dredge players activating Bazaar Baghdad in their upkeep in response to Icarid triggers, just so you can hit more creatures to possibly eat with your Icarid. Icarid does not choose the creature to eat until you are actually resolving the trigger, so you can actually eat things that are there after the trigger is on the stack, sort of thing. We do have some prized amalgam triggers, and we do have a Narcomoeba trigger for our draw step, which is pretty good. We don't have anything yet like a Flamekin Zealot or Elish Nord or something like that that can act as a way to stop our opponent. We're going to go ahead and play the second Bazaar Baghdad and immediately tap it to draw 2 cards and discard 3 cards. In the off chance that we can hit something that we can dread return, that might be pretty good. We see we do hit an Elish Norn in our graveyard to help with that. Elish Norn, we can possibly generate enough zombies off of Cabal Therapy in order to make Elish Norn basically effectively lethal the next turn, so that it may not even matter what creature threat they get off of Oath of Druids, that we may just win the game just based on that. So first of all, we're going to Cabal Therapy our opponent, and we're going to be looking for primarily Force of Will. That's the biggest card that we are going to feel bad about if they have it, so we want to make sure that they don't have it. And it looks like we do manage to hit at least one. Now, they also have a Flusterstorm and open mana to use Flusterstorm, so therefore we're going to spend our other Cabal Therapy and hit that Flusterstorm in their hand. It's another card that can stop us dead in our tracks with Dread Return. We don't want them to be able to cast that. Name Flusterstorm. There's the Flusterstorm in their hand. They also have a Dig Through Time in hand, but we really don't care about the Dig Through Time right now. What we care about is Dread returning these 3 zombies and turning them into Elish Norn. Grand Cenobite. Gives all your creatures +2/+2, and all your opponent's creatures -2/-2. She's going to trigger amalgams. Pretty much everything in the deck kind of triggers amalgam. So, if you're familiar with Modern Dredge, prized amalgam, when a creature enters the battlefield from the graveyard, you can enter the battlefield tapped at the beginning of the next end step. Resolving those amalgam triggers, which there are a lot of, unfortunately. One of the weird caveats of playing this deck on Magic Online. Our opponent casts fetches, and they cast Vampiric Tutor. Very interesting. We do have a Leyline of the Void in play, and it's worth noting that the way that Oath of Druids works is that Oath of Druids puts the cards that it reveals until you hit the creature card into the graveyard, but in this case, Leyline of the Void would put them in exile instead. So I'm assuming our opponent went to go get whatever creature they thought they wanted to have, which ended up being Gristlebrand. So Gristlebrand gives them some interesting action. They have the ability to draw twice off of Gristlebrand, so that's pretty good. They can draw a bunch of cards, so 14 cards, and they can find, hopefully, maybe something of an answer. We're probably not sure what kind of answer that's going to be, but maybe they can find something. Big issue with Gristlebrand in this case, however, is if they pass this a turn, he could possibly just be dead on board to another Dredge, and if we hit anything like a Flamekin Zealot in the graveyard, then we're given the opportunity to swing in for even more damage. So Gristlebrand being a 5/5, thanks to Elish Norn, is kind of bad in that situation. Our opponent does actually draw again to go down up another 7 cards. cast Mox Pearl. And they played a Forbidden Orchard, which is interesting. Is their land for turn. And what else are they doing here? Ancestral Recall, targeting themselves. So drawing 3 more cards, which is pretty amazing. If you've never cast Ancestral Recall, I heavily recommend it. It is one of the best feelings in all of Magic. Demonic Tutor. Do they have an answer to our board state at all? Or are they just trying to figure out if they can get around what's going on? Mox Sapphire. Mox Ruby. They've hit a lot of their artifact mana in this game. All of their artifact mana, practically. We've seen Lotus and we've seen the 5 Moxen so far. It's a very interesting line that they're taking. Time Walk. So they're going to take an extra turn. So they could, theoretically, untap. They could swing in over me and hit me for 5. And then be able to draw 7 more cards. But that puts them to 1, and we're not really sure if that's actually good or not. I think they could just be spinning the reels. They might be trying to find Time Vault and Voltaic Key if they run it in their main deck, which is a possibility. So they might be just looking for a way to prolong the game enough to be able to actually win the game. The other possibility here is that they may not have anything, and they may just be wanting to try and find anything they could have. The nice thing about what's going on here, however, is that Leyline of the Void is actually doing us a lot of favors. It is making them, when they're discarding all their cards here, into the point of they are discarding those cards into exile instead of into the graveyard, actually. They're going to put their Oath of Druids trigger on the stack. However, I don't think they're going to want to pick anything because there's possibly either not another creature or they don't want to dig that far into their deck to hit another creature. It's a very interesting game, but this is pretty classic of what Dredge, especially Pitch Dredge, what their game ones usually look like. Dredge is a very good Game 1 deck, even through such a thing such as a turn 1 Oath of Druids. Dredge can just play its stuff and get there no matter what. Just kind of waiting to see what our opponent is going to do, but they did discard a lot of cards. Not really sure what they're going to do there. They have no way of casting anything like Snapcaster Mage to get back their Time Walk, because Time Walk is now in exile. Anything like Yawgmoth's Will is not going to do them any good. They really needed OA to remove permanents from the board, and unfortunately they don't have that, so they concede, and we go to sideboarding. So for sideboarding in this matchup, generally what you're looking at bringing in is your permanent removal. Things like Chain of Vapor, Nature's Claim, and obviously the extra lands that you need to actually support playing those. What we end up trimming out of this deck is usually the Dread Return package, mainly Flame Gazelle at the 2 Dread Returns, Elish Norn, that sort of thing. You also kind of want to usually trim in certain places. I trimmed typically 1 or 2 cards here or there to get that. Hollow ones, I'm trimming entirely. We are on the draw. Hollow one is not great on the draw, especially against a deck that can reasonably play Dak Faden. And Dak Faden versus Hollow one is really awkward. So what I ended up doing was I ended up kind of running with 3 Leylines, because Leyline is still pretty good against Oath of Druids, because you're dumping their stuff into the graveyard, and they do rely a lot on possibly being able to recur spells from their graveyard. But then also cutting things like Mindbreak Trap, because Mindbreak Trap doesn't actually do us that much in this matchup. They're not really a Storm deck per se. They can be, if they want to be, because Oath can reasonably play anything it wants to play. However, I'm pretty sure that this guy is not playing a Storm version of Oath. He's playing Gristlebrand and Rug Colors, Ancient Grudge, that sort of thing. So it's pretty reasonable to say that he's on an Inferno Titan Oath of some sort. I'm not really sure if Inferno Titan would have been a good call for him in that matchup to hit. With his Vampiric Tutor, it could have been good, but it wouldn't have let him take another turn like Gristlebrand did. So this hand's pretty good. It's got a Bazaar in it. That's what we want to look for. Bazaar hands are always your best. We don't have a mana source to cast Chain of Vapor, but I don't think that actually matters offhand. We have the ability to play around that and dig for a Chain of Vapor mana. That's pretty good. Turn 1 Oath into Mox Ruby, but he doesn't have any lands, and that's odd. I don't know if I would have kept that hand, but myself from the Oath player, but it is what it is. So now we kind of have to play around things, because we're going to play this Bazaar. We draw into a Force of Will, which is pretty good, but we can't really commit any creatures to the board, in fear of Oath of Druids just kind of randomly wrecking us. If we don't have the ability to just put either a lot of power in play or a combo, then we can't really commit to that. And they could also possibly have a card like Ravenous Trap, and we could play around that to a little bit extent too. Or like Tormod's Crypt, which we're most assuredly going to Force a Will here. And pitch that second mental misstep, because I don't think we really need that second mental misstep. Blaze of Volcanic Island. Still no Forbidden Orchard or anything, which is the card that really Oath of Druids wants to see to produce mana with, is Forbidden Orchard, because it gives your opponent a creature. We're just going to draw. I think it's really important in this matchup that we're not committing a lot of stuff to the board. We run them out of their graveyard hate, and we put them in a position where they can't really easily beat our hate. And I really just want to pitch Nature's Claim to this Bazaar activation, just mostly because being able to put, if we hit a mana source to bounce Oath of Druids with Chain of Vapor, then we're in a much better spot because he doesn't have any green mana. And it's much better than giving him 4 life off of Nature's Claim, in my opinion. We're just gonna let the Sacred Trigger do nothing. Again, commit no creatures to the board. We have Amalgams in the yard. We do hit a Mana Confluence. That's pretty good. So we're gonna bounce that Oath of Druids. He doesn't have a response for it, so that's good. That's very good. Go ahead, and we're gonna do some dredging here. We're gonna ditch this mental misstep, because if he has Ravenous Trap, then we can just the extra force. Doesn't matter what we ditch there. We have force on blue card. If they have Ravenous Trap, which they have Ravenous Trap, we're gonna go ahead and Force a Will the Ravenous Trap, and hope that they don't have an answer for it. They don't! Hey, that's pretty good. We'll get back in Amalgam, and then we're gonna Therapy him, because that's kind of important right now. Is like, now we've got a Therapy. He doesn't have an Oath. He won't have Oath of Druid to play the next turn. Clear that he doesn't have anything like Mental Misstep or even Force of Will, because if he had Force of Will, he would have used it on that Ravenous Trap. Well, he has a Force of Will, but he doesn't have a blue card to go with it. So that's kind of amusing, actually. We're going to go ahead and get rid of his Force of Will. Actually, we don't really care about the Force of Will, per se, because the Force of Will, Force of Will to say he doesn't have a blue card to pair with it. So he can't really do much with it, per se. Even if he rips a blue card to go with it, he can just put himself in a position where we have the ability to just rip it out of his hand with a second Cabal Therapy. Do some dredging here on upkeep in response to this Ichor trigger. Get this Narcomoeba. At this point, we're grinding for a kill. We're not even going to bother casting anything other than Cabal Therapies in this particular matchup. We're really invested in just turning creatures sideways. So, because we don't have a Dread Return package or anything like that. It doesn't matter at this point. We're in a really good position with a really good board state. He has Ancient Grudges in hand. I'm not really honestly certain why he kept Ancient Grudge in this matchup. I wouldn't really consider that as a card that you would want to keep in the matchup, because yeah, you might expect Hollow on, but very smartly, any Dredge player is going to not keep Hollow One against a deck that could reasonably play Dak Faden if they suspect that they're going to be on the draw, especially in Game 2. If you're on the draw in Game 2 because you're a Game 1 deck and you won Game 1, then you're going to be able to do just fine without your Hollow Ones. That card is very much more of a you're on the play card. He picked up another blue card. He picked up Treasure Cruise as for his Force of Will. But we named Force of Will, so we took his Force of Will. Now we get to take his Treasure Cruise with Cabal Therapy. So that's a pretty good play. We don't care about those Ancient Grudges at all. So we're just going to get on the hitting Treasure Cruise. That stops him from accelerating some card draw. It also makes us a bunch more zombies. So that's pretty good. And we get some amalgams at end step. And it looks like our opponent concedes the match. That's it for that match. Our second match is against the deck Jeskai Mentor. We lose this match 1-2. However, this match is very interesting as it does contain the card Lavinia Azorius Renegade from Ravnica Allegiance. This card was recently seen on the Vintage Super League, and it is proving to be a new and powerful option in the Vintage format. Let's take a look at the results of this game. Alright, this hand is actually a mulligan. As you can see, we do not have a Bazaar of Baghdad in it, unfortunately. This hand is also a mulligan, so we have to end up going to 5 cards to find a hand that has Bazaar of Baghdad in it. So we have a Mindbreak Trap and a Bazaar, and we are able to play Bazaar turn 1 and tap it. Our opponent is casting Gataxian Probe, and checking out what we have in our hand. They're going to be pretty obvious that they know that we're on Dredge right off the bat, so it could be bad for us at that point if they know that they can kind of go shields down on certain things. Ponder, and wait for our opponent to resolve our Ponder. At this point, we don't actually know what our opponent is playing. One of the most common things you'll see in the Vintage format is masking your deck by playing out your artifact mana first. It's a very common sequencing thing. So you'll see players play their artifact mana in lieu of playing lands in order to actually mask what they're on. Opponent's casting Ancestral Recall during my turn. This is also a very common play. Casting Ancestral Recall on your opponent's turn means you don't have to discard to hand size. It also gives you more options on their turn, than it does on your turn. We're going to go ahead and activate Bazaar Baghdad and ditch some cards. We do get the benefit of getting a Mental Misstep and a Force of Will. Go ahead and we pass the turn to our opponent. Waiting for our opponent to progress through their draw step. Our opponent is going to cast Preordain. Again, we still don't really know exactly what our opponent is on at this point, because a lot of the same shells, especially the Xerax shells, and even the combo deck shells like Paradoxical Outcome, that sort of thing, all tend to run a lot of the same cantrips in the form of Brainstorm, Ponder, Preordain. It's really difficult to identify at that point what deck they might be on, and if they have a slow start or not. Misty Rainforest. Our opponent is just going to pass turn. They know we have this Mindbreak trap in our hand, and they are apparently playing around it, which is not bad. That's what they want to do. They want to play around the Mindbreak trap and hope that they don't run something crucial into it. They also don't know that we drew actual counter magic in the form of Force of Will and Mental Misstep. We untap and we activate Bazaar, and we hit 2 Grave Trolls, which is pretty good. So then we can proceed to our draw step, Dredge, while we're waiting on our opponent to probably be looking at our graveyard and figure out what's going on. We have not seen any sort of card like Narc Amoeba or Prized Amalgam or anything like that yet. So a little bit on the slow side of variance with this kind of dredge. We did end up with 3 Grave Trolls in the yard, however, so it's not a horrible set of dredges. We're currently just waiting on our opponent to do what they're going to do. Which may be nothing. Alright, so we're going to proceed to our draw step. And we still have not seen any Narc Amoebas or anything like that, so we just gotta pass turn. Sometimes this is what happens with the deck in Game 1. Even though we're a really, really good Game 1 deck, you still run into the situation where your dredges can be varianced like this, and you just don't see any creatures. We know we did hit an Icarid in the graveyard. That's pretty good. But beyond that, so our opponent is fetched for a Tundra, so this is kind of an issue at this point. We kind of now realize we're up against some sort of blue-white deck that also plays Gush, and one of Gush is very characteristic of decks like Xerox, Jeskai, Blue-Red Pyromancer. Now I consider maybe trying to counter this Time Walk. I think I just kind of let them have it and see if they present anything more threatening than wasting a Force Will on a Time Walk. Time Walk is pretty powerful, but they have enough cards in hand that they could possibly be in a position where they don't care. They're just going to counter it anyways. Preordain. Sometimes Time Walk is nothing more than a fancy Explore anyways, so them taking an extra turn this deep in is not usually that great. Now they could have Snapcaster Mage, and they could have had Snapcaster Mage and went Snapcaster Time Walk, but since they preordained, I don't think they have that. Another preordain. So they're digging for a specific threat or a specific answer, something that will help them win the game, I'm sure. Fetching another preordain. Lots and lots of preordain in this game. They're just churning through their deck with all their cantrips, hoping that I don't find a way to win the game. Basically, that's what it boils down to. So Black Lotus. I don't think I like him having that. We'll try and Mindbreak Trap it. He lets Mindbreak Trap go. So. Alright, so in our upkeep, we're going to go ahead and activate this Bazaar Baghdad in response to the Icarus trigger, like we want to do. And we do hit at least a Narcomoeba. So that's pretty good. Oh, 2 Narcomoebas. Even better. And we hit 2 Prized Amalgams. I'll go ahead and get this Icarus into play. That's just also going to trigger Prized Amalgam. Everything triggers Prized Amalgam. Go ahead and we'll dredge another Grave Troll. We have another Prized Amalgam in the yard. We do have a Flamekin Zealot. So let's just see what's going on with our opponent's hand. Let's see if they aren't going to try and force a will this Cabal Therapy. Seems kind of dumb that they would try to do that, but you never know. Oh, no, they are. They're going to force a will the Cabal Therapy. That's kind of funny. Okay. Well, we have another, so I'm not sure why I ended up naming Paradox Glaucom with this therapy. I definitely shouldn't have. Should have named Force of Will again, because he does actually end up having another Force of Will in hand. But I think I started to. He was protecting something. I started to, and then I was like, we'll see if they're on PO. Then I changed my mind, and I don't know why I changed my mind, because I had, as he has another Force of Will and a Snapcaster Mage in hand. However, we also have a Force of Will in hand, so we can Dread Return this Flamekin Zealot and get back some zombies and get back a guy that gives us hasty dudes. Really should have just named Force of Will with the therapy, and then I wouldn't have to worry about this. But now we have to force their force. So this gives us enough zombies to turn sideways to win the game, so that we go to sideboarding. Alright, sideboarding for this matchup. Generally, when it comes to these kinds of matchups, I try not to do a whole lot other than bringing in cards like Chain of Vapor. Again, taking out the Dread Return package. I think I ended up... I actually did remember to take out the Flame Gonzalez. Since I'm only bringing in Chain of Vapor, I'm only bringing in the Mana Confluences instead of the City of Brass. I am also bringing in Unmask to make them discard. We know that they're on some sort of Xerox deck at this point, so bringing out a couple of the hollow ones is fine, because they're going to be probably running a card like Dak Faden, where hollow one is kind of a liability. So the only bad thing about Hollow One is that Hollow One is a great card for getting around Graveyard 8, except we're on the draw, and we have to deal with Dak Faden a lot sometimes, and Dak Faden versus Hollow One is a pretty good upside for the Dak Faden player, unfortunately. We also board out the ley lines. We don't really care that they have a graveyard. Honestly, if we're hedging to beat Snapcaster Mage, it's not really worth it, in my opinion. I'd rather have interaction versus stuff like Containment Priest and interaction versus stuff like Rest in Peace. Because they're probably able to board out Snapcaster Mages for Rest in Peace. If they have it. Alright, so this is a keep, no matter what. This is going to be a hand we have to keep. It's got a Bazaar in it. And it has a Mental Misstep in it, at least. So definitely have to keep it. Our opponent's going to fetch. Pithing Needle. That's very important. We have to Mental Misstep that. Or at least try. Let's see if our opponent has a response for that. Oof, they've got a Force Will. Not good. So Pithing Needle, because it can name any card, can name a Bazaar Baghdad. So this Bazaar Baghdad has suddenly just got a million times worse. We cannot use it to dig through our deck for an answer. So now we have to start just drawing to try and draw into a land to try and draw an answer. There's a Force of Will. Not bad. But we still can't really do anything yet. So we might be able to Force Will if they have something really dumb. But Cavern of Souls. Cavern of Souls naming human. So Containment Priest maybe. Not really sure. And this is where we get to see our very first copy of Lavinia Azorius Renegade. So now, this Force of Will looks real bad in my hand because I can't cast it at all. So that's even more awkward. So trying to figure out what I'm going to do here is really, really difficult. We're just going to have to try and naturally draw into something. We can also draw into something that lets us discard to our end step, and then we can discard Stinkweed Imp and start dredging if they don't run into having a Containment Priest. Either way, it's probably going to be a little bit rough here. Mox Ruby. Dak Faden. Dak Faden is scary enough as a card advantage engine, but yeah, I don't know. I probably should have tried to force that. Considering that any other of the creatures that he might push out that's human, he probably can push out with Cavern. Either way, Lavinia is coming in to bring the beats. Just go to end step here and discard the Stinkweed Imp. Alright. Our opponent is going to activate Dak Faden, draw some cards. and we're just gonna, he's passing turn, so we're just gonna try and get some draws in, and again, go to end step and ditch this Stinkweed Imp back out of our hand. Our opponent continuing to draw with Dak Faden. Dak is pretty good at this kind of stuff. Dak is really great at being able to pitch cards that you don't want to say. Like, there's a Containment Priest that now we have to try and get rid of. And I completely missed it. Well, he did have a Cavernous Soul, so there was no way I could beat that. But beating both Lavinia and Containment Priest was just not going to happen. So I ended up conceding to that because he was going to be able to ult Dak. And I probably should have tried to counter Dak. Probably the more accurate play. So it's not everything you can see, every little piece of line in every game. So it is hard to try and determine if you should counter something when you should counter something. So I will say that. Pulling out the Mindbreak traps. We are on the play, so we could bring in some stuff. I'm not sure what I was thinking here with this ley line. I think I needed to be a Dredge return. I didn't even believe I did that. This game, this is a mulligan for sure. And this is fine. This has got a Bazaar, and it's got Force of Will in it. This game I do make a very, 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 very large misplay. And it shows. So, wait for our opponent to finish mulliganing. Alright. Go ahead and play our Bazaar. Scry, put the Stigweed up on top. Wait for our opponent to finish scrying as well. Alright. So we're going to go ahead and play the Bazaar. And we'll go ahead and we'll pass turn in case they have a Strip Mine effect of some sort. And this is where my misplay comes in. Because our opponent plays a turn 1 off of Tundra and a Mox. Wait for it. Rest in peace. And I tunnel vision on this really hard on this Chain of Vapor. And I didn't really think about it. And I didn't really think about I've got a Force of Will in my opening hand. And lo and behold, I could have cast that Force of Will. Now maybe my opponent would have had a Force. I don't know. But I felt really bad for trying to get around that by using Chain of Vapor instead of just you know, trying to Force Will it. I even had a Narcobeam in hand. I could have pitched for that, and it just didn't really click with me at the time when I was playing. And it happens. This is what happens when you end up playing somewhat poorly, in a sense, like by making a mistake. Mistakes are very easily to see after you're done making them, but in the heat of the moment, it just doesn't even make sense to even consider it as a mistake. Sometimes, like I said, you get tunnel vision on certain things. I know I'm very guilty of that myself, so it is what it is. Let's see what our opponent's got going on. They cast a Containment Priest. So now I decided to try and fight the Containment Priest because I have 2 pieces of Graveyard Hate I can't fight. I'm trying to Force Will it. Our opponent just lets it happen. So I very well could have fought the Rest in Peace and just didn't even think about it. So And this Ley Line of the Void, I'm not even sure why it's here. I feel really bad about that too. So now we're just trying to use Bazaar as a way to draw out of the situation that we're in, but I don't think it's going to be good enough. Draw another Chain of Vapor at least. Our opponent has no action going on right now at all. And that's a little awkward, but it is what it is. They have no action, and we just keep drawing nothing but cards that we keep putting into exile. If our opponent gets anything on board like Jace or anything like that, then we could be just pretty much done. Jace would be pretty good in this scenario, just because Fate Sealing, even though you're able to untap and maybe draw a card and then draw with Bazaar, chances are, if they see any lands, they're gonna bottom them, and that'll make it really hard. Opponent ponders. Then again, they just have nothing going on here to even do anything. Another Narcomoeba. We could try and draw with Bazaar, try and find a land. No lands. Find a Mental Misstep. But honestly, want to keep a Dredger in hand for when, if we can get rid of that. Rest in peace. And it's not looking likely that we're getting rid of it anytime soon. Second rest in peace. Okay, so yeah, at this point we are officially going to be done. We might be able to get rid of one rest in peace, but getting rid of a second rest in peace is just not going to happen. And now that Lavinia's in play, we're done. We aren't going to be able to do anything at all, unfortunately. So we'll try and draw one last time, but unfortunately, that's it for this game. We are done. That's all the time we have for this episode, but I would like to thank you guys for watching, and I hope you're enjoying this series. As always, if you'd like to support my content, please subscribe to my channel on YouTube, and check out patreon.com/fullwrathxp to pledge to my Patreon. Before we go, I would like to extend thanks to Tom Hepp at Negator77 and Chris Ross at CK Ross for helping me with some of the cards needed to be able to provide gameplay for this video. Until next time, keep casting Moxen and keep cracking them lotuses.